Very good afternoon, Mr. Swana. So we're now in the voting week. Of course, today and Tuesday will be the special voting period. Now, with the vast majority of South Africans set to vote on Wednesday, one could say, of course, that this election is really about bread and butter issues. When you surveyed the various manifestos on offer, were there any parties that you felt sold viable propositions in terms of economic growth and jobs plans?
Thank you, Nompu, and the viewers at home. Yes, I think my ultimate conclusion was that it's probably necessary to have a session after the elections to really write a plan for South Africa. The manifestos that, and I've had a chance to review manifestos all over of the many parties, are not adequate to give us clear direction to resolve even the unemployment problem and the key economic problems in the country. Some of these manifestos, even from the two major leading parties right now, would actually sink us if we're to accept them.
Now, the DA's tagline has been Rescue South Africa, and one of the areas it's homed in on is rescuing learners from what it says is a failing education system. In your assessment, why do you think the public sector education system hasn't generally produced good outcomes? Because the government, quite frankly, has thrown a significant proportion of its expenditure on this particular portfolio over a number of years.
Every part of the state, including the education system, which is failing the black community, which specifically the so-called colored communities and the African communities very badly. What has happened certainly in the period of democracy, the past 30 years, the quality of leadership at the school level has deteriorated significantly, and the quality of the individual teacher in each school, in each subject, has deteriorated significantly. So the 95% of the problem you face in the education sector, specifically in the black schools, being the colored communities and the African communities, is about the quality of the principals and the quality of the teachers in the classroom. That is the problem that needs to be resolved right now.
Absolutely. So coming to the economic freedom fighters, they've talked about raising some of the social grants. They talked about raising the child grant from the current 500 Rand thereabouts to 1,200 Rand. The old age pension grant to 4,000 Rand from around 2,000 Rand now. They also talk about funding all the state-owned entities. They talk about training left, right and center for whoever needs it. Is this a case of a young party thumb-sucking numbers and ideas that sound good? Or do you think that these are matters that they will have thoroughly calculated and thought through? Because to my mind, this sounds like we as South Africa would be incurring far much more debt. And the reality is that we can't afford to incur that much more debt, can we?
The problem of debt, now that you've raised it, is not something that should worry us as such, in the sense that our problem has not been the debt itself. Our problem has been the growth rate of the GDP, because if your growth rate of GDP, if the GDP size grows, then the debt as a percentage of GDP diminishes. What has happened instead, we have invested in projects that had no return on investment, Midupi, Kusile, and so on. So the mismanagement of state investments has created the problem, and that is the problem that needs to be solved. And it's not a problem only of putting money into state-owned entities. It is, again, a problem, first and foremost, of putting in the correct skills, the correct caliber of people into every section of the state, and then making sure that all the entities are funded as well as all the projects are funded. When we have a growing GDP and moving closer to full employment, welfare then becomes possible. So there's a sequencing that needs to be done. There's a sequencing that needs to be done as to welfare must come once you have in your mind resolved the issue of full employment in South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly, whoever does win the election come the 29th of May, when we get the results, whenever that may be, ultimately, are you confident that South Africa does have the capacity? Because in the past, we've lamented this whole issue of cadre deployment, not that there's anything wrong within itself, but that some people who have been, deployed to certain portfolios have not had the necessary skills, and even those below them. Do you think we have the capacity to be able to take the country forward?
South Africa is well endowed with skills to solve every problem that needs to be solved in South Africa. Right now, there's no problem that we wouldn't know how to solve. However, we have to recognize that it should not be compulsory for specialists and competent people to join any specific political party in order to be deployed in the area of skilling and talent that they already have. South Africa does not need to be ashamed of its skills base, but we do have to be ashamed of the fact that for the past 30 years, we've been worryingly consistent in appointing the most incompetent South Africans to positions of high responsibility.
Thank you so much, Mr. Swana, political analyst there, Sandile Swana.